and welcome to the She Geeks Out podcast, where we geek out about workplace inclusion and talk with brilliant humans doing great work, making the world a better and brighter place. I'm Felicia.
And I am Rachel, and I'm so excited to introduce you to our next lovely guest. This episode is a bit of a departure from our usual lineup, but I want to tell you that it is in the best possible way. We are...
Yes. What's happening?
What's happening? Well, if you've read the description, you'll probably have a little bit of an inkling, but I'll tell you in your ears. We are joined by the lovely Cindy Aaker. She is an intuitive guide and founder of Soul Speak, who helps people connect with angels. Yes, I said those words. They really happened. We barely scratched the surface of her work, but we wanted to bring her on because she offers something many of us are craving right now, a sense of purpose, connection, and frankly, a little bit of hope that maybe, just maybe, we're not alone in this wild world, and perhaps there's some meaning behind all of this madness. And Felicia, what madness do you think I could possibly be referring to as we record this on June 23rd, the year of our Lord, 2025?
Thank you for sharing the date, because it's more important than ever to situate when we record things so people understand the context in which we are recording, because it is Monday, June 23rd, and we are just coming off of a wet and wild weekend in which we are maybe in World War III. I don't know. Do you know? Nobody knows. What's happening?
Well, the stock market doesn't know. It seems to be fine with everything that's happening. So what's up with that?
Yeah. I mean, we're laughing because I think you sort of have to find humor and laugh because it is so freaking bonkers. Actually, it's our podcast. I'm going to curse. It's so fucking bonkers right now. Like, if we were to pull up a June episode from 2024, I don't even know what, if we could travel back in time and tell our past selves, I think we wouldn't be totally surprised. I don't think, but still, it's still shocking.
You know what's funny about that, though, is as I think about June 2024, I'm pretty sure that, and we have to look it up because
I know what you're going to say. I know what you're going to say.
I mean, I think it was the whole Biden-Kamala situation.
Yes. And Cindy was talking to you about this at that point.
Oh, she sure was.
Yeah. Predictions. Yeah.
But
yeah, so I mean, over the weekend, we bombed Iran. We might, by the time this episode comes out, might be in nuclear war. I don't know, but it is just, there's a lot happening right now. And yes, this is definitely a bit of a departure from some of the other guests and topics. But to your point, I think it's really, first of all, we wanted to have a bit of a departure conversation to begin with, because when stuff is really heavy, it's important to bring in hope and lightness and joy where you can find it. And I think Cindy brings a lot of that. And we talk a bit about sort of our own perspectives and some of our own journey into talking about like spirituality and religion and meditation and things like that. But there are a lot of people out there who I think are looking for not necessarily answers, but support from other places than your boss or your coworkers or your friends or your parents or your family or whatever it might be, because we're in uncharted territories right now for a lot of us.
Yeah, and I also think meaning too. And it's just such an interesting time because, and I've been seeing a bunch of memes on the internet around this lately, and I'm sure that I would be shocked if there's anyone listening to this that would not agree with this, is that there is some serious cognitive dissonance happening for those of us that are working, that are trying to like have our little meetings and make sure that we get our little projects taken care of and that we're doing all these things. Meanwhile, if we're seeing what's happening in the greater picture, there's just all of this madness. And so I think that this has been something that has been building probably forever, but I would say it's felt acute since the beginning of the pandemic. And I think that, we're sort of like coming to this point where it feels like just so much more intense, where we're all kind of questioning our values and our purpose and what are we doing when we are showing up at work and trying to be okay because we have to, because we are still in these systems where we still got to pay a mortgage or a rent, and we still got to buy groceries, and we got to feed our kids, and we got to pay health insurance because our systems are crazy. And then still like try to find a little bit of peace sometimes, And so that's, I feel like, why we needed Cindy on today.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I was trying to, on the back end, do a little bit of sly Googling, but I couldn't find what I was looking for. But I was just scrolling the social medias, doom scrolling, if you will, as we've been doing, as I've been doing, I should say. I'm not going to speak for anyone else, as I've been doing nonstop. But I was reading something this morning about exactly kind of what you were just talking about, where it was like a post where they shared a word, and I can't find the word, unfortunately, but if I find it before we package up this episode, I will certainly put it in the show notes. But it basically is a Russian word for this like cognitive dissonance that people feel when you are living under like authoritarian, fascist, oligarchical rule, but you're still just doing you're living your daily life. You're going to work, you're making food, you're sitting at home, you're watching TV, whatever it is. And whatever the word is, it was this word, and it just felt very pertinent because that's exactly it, right? Like we're living our lives, and stuff is bonkers. And it's just like I've been seeing a lot of memes where people have been posting things where they're like, "Yeah, what will you do when the bomb hits?" And they're like, "Well,
Mm.
I'll be going to work because I won't get the day off." Like, this is the wild life that we are in right now.
Yeah. It is wild, and so I hope that for all of our listeners and for everyone else, we could just find some peace, and I genuinely hope that as you listen to this conversation, and will absolutely have a part 2 because we really
Did
barely
not
scratched
even
this.
get into it. We love to say, "Let's get into it." Well, we got into it, but we didn't get fully into
We
it.
really didn't. We really just scratched the surface, but we do believe that on good day, I like to say on a good day, I believe that all this is happening for a reason and it's gonna be okay, and then there's gonna be hope, and so I'm in a good moment.
Okay, I'm glad. I'm glad to hear that.
I can't even say a good day, I'm gonna say a good moment.
Hey, listen, it's day by day, moment by moment, minute by minute.
I love it.
I don't know, whatever it's gonna be.
Well, let's go. I say let's
Ah,
just without
let's do
further
it.
ado.
All right. Well, welcome to the show, Cindy.
Yay.
I'm very happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
We're so excited to have this conversation. There's so much to get into, and we're just gonna like get going because time, even though it's a social construct, still kind of exists.
It does.
So let's start at the beginning. We love always hearing about your origin story, the origin story for our guests. So just want to get into that. What was your relationship to spirituality like growing up? How's it connect with how you show up in the world today?
Well, it's a mixed bag for sure. I was raised actually Catholic. I did all of my catechisms. I went through the whole thing and we went to church and we did do our catechism on Saturdays. It was a lot of Catholic. I mean, I didn't go to Catholic school, but I had to do Saturdays was catechism and then Sunday was church. And I think it was even too much for my mom because it got to a point where we started going to the Saturday evening mass because it was only 45 minutes.
That's hilarious. I also grew up Catholic, and I went to CCD, which I think is your catechism, and ours were on Wednesdays, by the way, and my mom was not into it. She's also Hindu, so I don't know why she was taking us to everything, but question for my dad. Anyway.
And I feel like I need to chime in to say, and I'm jealous because I was baptized, but I didn't go to CCD because my mom was a hippie lapsed Catholic and was like, no. And I was like, but I really want the cute dress. So,
Oh, yeah. The dress, that was for first communion, the little first communion
yes,
dress.
Yep, yep.
yes,
Yep. So, yeah, so I started out Catholic. I've since recovered.
exactly.
No, religion is wonderful. It is, it has its strengths, it has its purpose, but it also can be quite limiting, to be honest. For me, Catholicism started to lead to more questions being asked versus being answered. And so I started in on all those books, especially in the 90s. So I was still pretty Catholic up until my 20s. And then when I got into my 20s and I moved away, I started to have more conversations and I started reading. And the first book that really kind of turned me on to my path was called, well, there were two. One was Feel the Fear and Do It Anyways. It was like this first self help book because for some reason I was just so afraid of so many things and I didn't know why. And so that kind of, I realized, oh, there's some power in these books. And then my second book was Way of the Peaceful Warrior. And that one kinda leaned more into the spirituality thing, and it just kinda started to really it really just started to speak to me. I think I'd always been a little bit psychic, I'm sure that I had been. I always knew who was on the other side of the phone before or the call before we would answer the phone, and this is, of course, before caller ID. But I always knew who was on the others. And it was kind of creepy, to be honest. I would like not purposely answer it because I know it was for my sister. I'm like, Dave's calling. And she'd be like, how do you know? And I was right every single time. So it kind of started there. I think it then it kind of just plateaued, and it was all very cerebral and intellectual. There was not a real strong connection until only about 5.5 years ago now, when I had kind of a rude awakening for myself with spirit. And a very long story short, because you've heard the story and you know.
I haven't heard it.
Okay, well, I'm happy to share it if we have the time.
We have the time.
I'll try to keep it a little bit short, but okay. So I was just about to be married to my current husband. And this was, I guess, in I want to say about 2004 is when this kind of started. I would go to bed, and about an hour after falling asleep, I would get this kind of panic that I was forgetting something very, very important. I didn't know what. I would wake up and be like, how could I possibly forget that? And then I'd sit up and be like, wait, I didn't forget anything. And this went on for weeks and weeks. And it was just very strange. And I couldn't explain it at all. But we got married. I ended up getting pregnant pretty quickly after getting married. And they stopped. It just completely stopped. I had my babies, 2 boys, and it stopped for, I guess, now about 12 years. It just completely stopped. And then about 4.5 years ago, it started again. And it was this panic of, oh my gosh, I'm forgetting something. And it got so intense that it went from being I forgot something to something really bad is going to happen. And then the last episode I had, I woke up because I absolutely 100% knew without a shadow of a doubt that I was going to die if I hadn't woken up. I knew it. I knew it to my core that I was going to die. And it scared me so badly that I hopped out of bed, and it took me like a half an hour just pacing the house, calming down. My heart was pounding so much. And I just knew that I was going to die. And I had this little image in my brain of just this weird picture. And I drew the picture. And then the next day, I kind of started researching what it could be. And I was talking to friends, and they were saying, well, this sounds like it might be a Reiki symbol. Maybe it's Reiki. And so I'm looking at these Reiki symbols, and there's nothing that looks anything like it. And then I talked to my acupuncturist friend, and she thinks, I think it's a past life thing. And here I am. I got to a point where, yes, I believed in reincarnation. You know, Catholicism was completely out of my system, although I love Mother Mary so much and still do. She's around my neck. But Catholicism kind of, it just went away. It just went away.
Well, this is great, though. Thank you for sharing,
Oh.
first of all, because I don't know if I knew any of this, but first thing I want to say, which is totally like not related, but related a little bit, is I thought it was so funny when you said your current husband, because that's like a big TikTok trend right now. I don't know if anyone else is aware of this, but
No.
I just had to shout that
Hilarious.
out for anyone who's listening, because it's like a trend to get on video with your partner and be like, this is my current boyfriend or my current husband. And then like supposed to react and be like, what do you mean current? Anyway, side note, I don't know if that was your intent. Maybe
It
not.
wasn't, but I guess I'm on trend without knowing.
You're on trend. But I'm so loving what you're sharing, and I'm really excited we're having this conversation, because I know Rachel and I have talked a bit about this over the years, but when I mentioned briefly, so my family, I was also raised Catholic. I have similar-ish experiences to you. My mom's Hindu, she's Indian, so I was brought up just from the beginning with this very big awareness that while I was going to church and I was doing the classes and the communion and confirmation, all that stuff, that there was also this whole other part of my family that believed in different gods and different stories and things. And from a very early age, which maybe actually lent itself well to my work, I understood how to hold multiple truths at the same time. And so to your point around, I think you mentioned this when you referenced Mother Mary, but for me, and I think for a lot of folks who are, whether you call it lapsed Catholics or recovering Catholics, or what you want to call it, there's such a sort of like built in my bones feeling around religion. So if I walk into a church and I like smell it and I'm in the space and whatever, it feels like at a very deep level, like right. It feels like religion with a capital R, but I don't agree with a lot of what that religion or that church is saying.
Yeah.
And I also from an early age was like, if I go all in on this, then I'm basically denying what my mom believes and what, she holds true to and what her experiences have been. So for me, I talk a lot about spirituality, which is where I know you're going with this. And that's why I'm excited about this, because I feel like there is something there in my mind, but the religions are just sort of like attempts of explaining it, and it's about the deeper spirituality beneath all of it. So anyway, I just wanted to jump in and share that.
No,
I,
absolutely.
I get so excited talking about this because I think there's just so much to dig into.
There's always the one line that loops through all religions too.
Right, exactly. And they're so similar in many ways, right? And that's why I'm like, as a side note, I'm like, I can't handle religious wars because I'm like,
Yeah.
you all believe in something else, like at the base of it.
Yeah,
So why
exactly.
can't we get unified on that?
Totally. Well, because it's used for control. Bottom line. That's just where it
Mm-hmm.
comes down to. It's just a way to control. I mean, you're selling salvation, basically. It's like,
That's right.
it's a great business model.
An excellent business model.
But yeah, so back to the symbol that I had. I was talking to my acupuncturist. That's where I left off. And she said it sounded like past life stuff. And I was saying that I had since believed in reincarnation, but I hadn't really studied it. I didn't know a whole lot about it and past lives. And I always thought that was kind of cool, but I knew nothing about it. And so I thought I need a book because I'd learned so much through books. Like all my spirituality was through books. So I went online and I found this one book and it jumped out at me. And I'd never heard of what this was before, but it was called How to Read the Akashic Records by Linda Howe. And I did not know what Akashic Records were. I'd never heard of that before, but I'm like, I need to get this book. And so I got the book. And there have been times when, when you've read some spiritual books or things where it just doesn't vibe with you and you're like, ugh, I can't finish this, or you fall asleep while you're reading it. This book, it was like a sponge. I couldn't put it down. And it was just like I was soaking it up. I was reading it so quickly. And in this book, what Linda Howe does, she's a channel, and she channeled what's called the pathway prayer. And it's a very, very long, very wordy prayer. And you're supposed to kind of get into this meditative state where you're breathing and you're relaxed. And then you say these words, you just read them out of the book, and it's supposed to connect you to the Akashic Records. Now, for those that don't know what the Akashic Records are, I'll do a quick explanation. The Akashic Records, you can think of it as like a gigantic spiritual library. It's a library in beyond space and time in the spiritual realm that contains every single thought, action, reaction, choice, moment that a single soul has experienced throughout every single one of their lifetimes. That is what the Akashic Records, and it holds everybody's. And this is more for Earth. It's an Earth human library. It's not for, the spacemen.
Which is a whole other
That's a
episode
whole
we
other
need to
conversation.
do.
They have their
Don't get
own
me
set of
started.
records. Each planet has their own set of records. Ours is the Akashic Records. So apparently you can connect, you say this prayer, you connect to the Akashic Records, and you start receiving messages. And I'm like, well, this sounds kind of woo-woo and a little bit out there, but I'm game because I was, I'm like, I was guided to buy this book. I'm gonna do it. So I do everything it says, and I say the prayer, and I ask a question, and I hear something. And it's not like you don't hear with your ears. For me, I would just receive words. It wasn't like words being spoken, it was just words being projected into my brain, is the only way I can explain it. And so I was like, this is BS. I'm like, there's no way. And so I read on in the book, and she says, you're going to think you're making this up and that it's not true. But here is a little exercise that you can do to prove that you are actually receiving messages. And I'm like, okay, obviously, you know what's going on because I need that. So the exercise that she offers us to do is you ask your intuition a question that is really alive in you, something that you really want an answer to that you don't have an answer to. And you journal the answer. So you just kind of intuition, why, blah, 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 journal the answer. And then she says, I want you to do the pathway prayer and then ask the Akashic Records the same question and journal the answer. And the answers will be related but different. I'm like, okay, let's do this. So my question was a little backstory because I kind of need to give it to you. My husband's family was very, very evangelical. He was raised in the church. His parents are very Christian. He wasn't allowed to have TV. He couldn't even go and see Fantasia in the theater, Mickey Mouse, because it was,
Too wild.
yes, it was evil and voodoo.
Right.
And so I love my extended family so much. My in-laws are beautiful people. I love them all. I get along with all of them so very much. Like, they're just wonderful people. But anytime they would start with the Jesus talk, I would get so uncomfortable. Like, so uncomfortable. Where I kind of like I would just get silent and I would freeze and I would just be like I just couldn't participate in the conversations, and then I would go to church with them, and I was just so uncomfortable, and I'm like, that was my question. I asked my intuition, why am I so uncomfortable with my husband's family's religion? And the answer that I journaled from my intuition was what you would kind of expect. I had been raised Catholic, but I started to explore spirituality because it wasn't answering the question for me anymore. And so I felt like I had earned where I was at with my learning and my knowing and my exploration of spirituality, and that I wasn't just spoon fed and told to believe this and told to believe that they really expected me to kind of believe what they believed and want me to go to church, but they never once asked me what I thought. They never asked my opinion about what I believed. It was always kind of just like shoved off to the side. I almost felt like the black sheep because I was not the Christian in the family. And so that was my received answer. And then I went into the Akashic records and I asked the same question. And what came through was so unexpected that I was blown away because I that's when I knew that I was not making this up. The answer that I got was, you were persecuted at the highest level in multiple lifetimes for your religion, for your beliefs. You were burned at the stake, you were hung. The Spanish Inquisition went after you, went after your family, went after everybody that you knew. You had to worship in secret. All of these things were coming through that I never in a million years would have ever thought that I would have experienced. And so that's how I knew right then and there that I was receiving messages, because I'd never in a million years would have ever considered that I'd been burned at the stake during the Spanish Inquisition. A few times, like 3 times. It did go on for 400 years. So
What's up with your soul, Cindy, that you kept being persecuted? What's that about?
well, my guess is that I wasn't Christian, right? I wasn't Christian, and here we go. And again, in this life, not Christian.
So
Like
much suffering.
it's the same thing, right? I'm the same person. Well, not the same person, but the same soul moving through all of these different lives. And I'm always aligned to spirituality that is not religious. So, yeah, so that was kind of it where I'm like, holy moly, this is crazy. 2 weeks after that, I was going to bed, and what's kind of went into my brain, just popped in there, and I hadn't done the prayer or anything, but it just popped in there, was Spanish flag. And I'm like, Spanish flag? What is that? So I grab my phone and I start scrolling through pictures of the Spanish flag, and I come across this one. And at the very top of the flag itself is the picture that I had burned into my brain when I'd woken up with that panic that I was going to die. Basically, what they were saying, they were showing me the moment right before I had died in one of my lifetimes by the Spanish Inquisition. That's what that feeling of knowing that I was going to die, and that panic and that feeling was. I was reliving that moment in today's time, in that moment. And it was frightening, so frightening.
Were they showing that to you for you to become awake to this whole
That's so as I learn more and more, and as we can talk into how I connect to my guides and everything,
Yeah.
we kind of glossed over all that. We haven't skimmed into that at all. But yes, that was basically they were laughing because, by the way, our spirit guides are freaking funny. They're funny. They've got senses of humor. They relate to you the way you want to be related to. And I have kind of a quirky sense of humor and a little bit sarcasm. And so when I found that out and I asked them, what was that all about? Why did I have that panic? Like, what was going on? They were giggling and they were saying, well, we had to wake you up, Cindy. We had to get your attention. And so that's what got me on this path. I finished the book and I started doing all the exercises that they asked, and I started to receive more and more information. I was connecting with my guides and I found out who they were and I learned their names. And I realized that I have a very strong connection to archangels. And so I was learning about them, and I'd always thought of angels as biblical and like religion. And so I was kind of like, oh, angels. No, 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 no. But I've come to realize that it's not religious at all. And that every single one of us has at least one archangel that is our guide. Every one of us has one archangel that is one of our guides that we connect with. And my main one for me is Michael. He's been with me since my soul was incepted. So this is not incarnated, but the inception of the soul, the creation of the soul. We have masters, teachers, and we have loved ones. These are our guides. This is what I've learned through the Akashic records. Masters are the guide that's been with us since the inception of our soul, and they're always with us throughout all of our lifetimes. Teachers are high vibrational light beings that may or may not have ever incarnated on Earth, but they aren't anymore. They're no longer incarnating on Earth, and they are with us to help us learn lessons, which is why we come to Earth, is to grow, to evolve, to learn lessons. We can get into some of that if we want to. But the teachers, once you have learned your lesson, they will leave and you'll get a new teacher. And then we also have loved ones. And a loved one can be someone that was in your current life that died maybe when you were very young, like a grandparent or an uncle or something like that is close to you, or someone that was it's usually a family member, someone that was in your family in your previous life, your last lifetime. So I had found out that Michael was one of mine, and Beth was her name, is another one. And she was a sister in my past life. She was my loved one. And then I also had another guy named James. When I was asking him, like, who's James? Beth explained who she was, and I knew who Michael was because the angels. But I'm like, who are you, James? And a picture of Jesus came into my brain, and it was showing me that this was James, Jesus's brother. So this was my other guide. So those were the three that I started out with. It's changed. Michael's still here, but I'm no longer working with Beth and James. But there are others that kind of come in and out, and yeah.
Oh
So
my God.
now that's how I got here, and it's been a crazy ride, and I've developed so much over the past 5 years. I can contact people on the other side that have crossed over. Like I said, I work with archangels and do a lot of energy healing with the angels. I now, oh my gosh, my life is just so different now. It's just completely different now. I live my life completely differently now. And it's been amazing. And I'm so excited that I get to have this experience. So, yeah,
Oh, Cindy, thank you so much for sharing all of that. I
very
feel like
long story.
no, I feel like Felicia and I have like probably a million and one
Yes.
different questions. And in fact, I will pause. Felicia, go forth.
Oh, well, I'm in the same boat as you, Rachel. I could probably just ask you like 10,000 questions just from what you've shared so far.
Totally.
I don't want to derail us too much, but I was like taking some notes as you were chatting. I am curious just because you kind of shared a lot, and I guess maybe I'll try to pin some of my other questions and hopefully they'll get answered later. But the biggest question I have right now is just maybe if you could talk a little bit more about the bridge from doing the journaling and accessing the Akashic records to the Archangel and the other guides that you just
Yes.
mentioned. Because I feel like for a
You
lot of
did a
people,
big jump.
like that's a pretty big jump, right? And so I'm curious, like, how that first occurred. Like, were you reciting, I think you mentioned is the pathway prayer, which, we've all worked on together with, which we'll talk about later, I'm sure. But like, was it that? And then you sort of had this like download of like information, or like how did that actually
That's an excellent question. I told you it was a long story. So after I discovered that I was connecting and I was receiving messages, and they weren't like long, elaborate messages or anything, it was just little bits here and there. And it would be knowings. Again, it would just be kind of knowings and words that would come through, and pictures. Our guides like to give us pictures because we can relate to those. And we can, again, a picture is worth 1,000 words, right? So this is why they like to use pictures. But after I had this experience, I contacted my acupuncturist again. And she was a very spiritual person. And I told her what I was experiencing and everything like that. And that's when she started talking about, well, she didn't even start talking about it. We went for a walk and she brought her dog, and her dog's middle name was Metatron. And Metatron, yes. I had to ask. I'm like, is that some kind of transformer? Like, what? But turns out Metatron is an archangel. And he is actually one of the only 2 archangels that had ever been on the earth in human form. So she talked about Metatron, and that's when I was like, oh, angels, no, blah, type of situation. But she's like, it's not what you think. And so I started to research it. And I went online and I found this woman. Her name is Christina Roche, and she's an Archangel channel. And she has this Archangel series of videos on YouTube that explain who the Archangels are, what their specialties are, how they help us, how they guide us. And then at the end of each video, she brings in, I guess is the only way you can say it, she brings in the energy, she calls in the energy of that angel, and you can feel it because, again, energy transcends time and space. And so you can actually experience the feeling of this energy through the video. And I'm like, all right, well, let's do this. So I chose Metatron. I'm like, why not? So I watched this video, and at the very end, she calls the energy in, and lo and behold, I freaking start bawling my eyes out. I'm crying, like snot bubble crying, because I knew this energy. I could cry right now just remembering it, but I won't. But yeah, she called in the energy, and it was like this gigantic, it was like walking into a hug is what it felt like. And it changed everything. After that, I'm like, holy crap, this is like real, like I could actually feel that. It was kind of crazy. I was no longer just kind of getting visions or getting words. I was actually feeling really, really, really strong emotions and strong physical reactions. This will pass. So I then am like, well, there's a lot of archangels. I got to know them all. And I went through the whole gamut of them, and I knew almost all of them. I recognized their energy. I felt them, and I was like, oh my gosh, like I knew all of these angels. I'm a pescatarian or a vegetarian, however you want to call it. But I do cook. I've got 2 boys and they like meat. And so I do cook meat. And so forever, I've always kind of said a little prayer for the animal before I start cooking it. And I close my eyes and I thank the animal for its life and its sacrifice. And I would always get this nice tingly feeling after I would do that. And that was one of the angels. That was the feeling that I got. It was Archangel Ariel that came through. And she, of course, is the angel that is all about nature and animals. And she's the one that you feel when you're in nature. And I'm like, I know her. I knew her. And it was like that with all of these angels. I'm like, I know this from somewhere. And so that's kind of how I started to connect. And I actually got to a place where I was like chatting with them all, but I would have to ask them, who am I talking to? And I didn't want to do that. I wanted to kind of just know them. And so I asked them to get each of them to give me a somatic response whenever I was connecting to them, so I would know who it was. So in the beginning, I don't get the somatic response anymore because now I just know who they are. But in the beginning, I would ask and I would ask for a somatic response, and I would call them in and I'd connect to them through the Akashic records. And then I would write down what I was feeling. So I'd get like an itchy palm, or I'd get tingles down the back of my legs, or I'd get tingles on the top of my head. And each angel would give me a different feeling. And so that's how I started to learn how to communicate. And the more and more I communicated, and the more I was in there, the less and less I needed to use the prayer. They were telling me, you can stop using the prayer, by the way. You don't need it anymore. And I'm like, no, I need it. Because I was so afraid I wasn't going to be able to connect without it. Because I was just loving this. I was like in this whole new world. I felt like I discovered like a whole new world. And I just wanted to be there all the time. And I thought that if I disconnected or if I didn't use it, I wouldn't be there anymore. And as a result, I didn't disconnect for kind of too long. And I went through a phase where I felt like I'd had about 6 Red Bulls on top of 4 cups of coffee, and I was jittery and I was like crazy, but I didn't want to disconnect because it was such a beautiful experience. And they're like, "Cindy, you got to disconnect. You have to disconnect because you're going to overload." And so I finally had to just kind of let it go and try and sleep. And I think I slept for a good long time after that. But yeah,
And that was 5.5 years ago?
that was 5.5 years ago. Yeah.
That is just so wild to me because, like, when I think about the timing of that, it was, like, right before COVID. When this happened, do you think this happened from a timing perspective based on, like, world stuff? Or do you think just personally, like, where you were with in your life with your kids being a little bit older? Like, why this timing?
Well, from what I understand, it has a lot to do with actually it's the date and where we are astrologically. We're going into a transition period of a 26,000 year cycle.
Let's get into it, Cindy. Let's talk about the cycle.
We're entering into the age of Aquarius, by the way, and as an
That's exactly
Aquarian,
it. Yes.
like, here for it. So, there's a lot happening. So,
Oh, there
I'm
is.
with you on the astrological significance.
And
I
so
mean,
I'm not an astrologist. I don't know all that stuff, but I do know that it actually is it's a science. It is not a woo-woo science. It's actual real science. There's a lot of math involved. Anybody that's ever done any astrology. But it is because we're coming into the age of Aquarius. And so it's all prep. And we needed this in order to move us forward. And so I was not the only one that started waking up right around COVID. COVID actually it caused a lot of people to go inward because there was nothing outside. So there's how many people started yoga? How many people started meditating? How many people started doing all of these things? And that was the time. The timing was
And
COVID.
reevaluating life and
Everybody,
values.
well, and not just your values. It's like, who am I at a base? Not even what do I stand for, but who am I?
Totally.
Who am I? And COVID was kind of necessary. It actually was a necessary thing to have happen so that everybody could just step back from the chaos and craziness of the world and go inward and really reflect into who they actually are and why am I here and what is important to me? Like, how many businesses were lost? And so many people had to start over. And so they really had to reevaluate what is important to me and how do I want my life to be? It was almost like a recreation.
And also how many lives were lost, and so it made the value of life so much higher too.
Absolutely. And there are definitely other reasons for life being lost as well. This is a time where there have been agreements made with our soul contracts that if we hadn't gotten to a certain point within our soul evolution, we agreed to go back to the other side to help from that side. If you couldn't help from this side to move us forward into a higher vibration, into a new way of living, into a more unified way of being as humans, if you weren't going to be able to do that in the way that your soul contract agreed you to, you were going to help from the other side. So that plays a part of it. Again, there's so many aspects to so many things that can just take us onto so many different tangents. We would need weeks to talk about it all.
I know. Well, Rachel and I we're like, I don't know if we're going to have enough time for the conversation we really want to dig into. So we'll see how the rest of this discussion goes. We may need part two, but it's funny because just earlier today, Rachel and I were chatting and we were like, did we all just die in 2020? And this is just some kind of like extended, like lost purgatory situation. I don't know, but I do think the timing again is an interesting point because no matter what you believe in, you have to admit that point in time really created a huge shift no matter what you believe in. And a lot of things have changed. I had a really quick question, if you don't mind me just going back a little bit, because you mentioned the first angel that you sort of accessed, I guess, into, which was Metatron, and then the other archangels that you mentioned too. And what I find really interesting is that, and again, I'm not an expert at all in any of this, but I did a really quick Google on the back end while you were talking. And so, Metatron, according to AI on Google, is a significant figure in Jewish mysticism and often described as an angel. And then Archangel Michael, and obviously there's a lot of other stuff too. So what I'm finding super interesting is that even though you mentioned how, you were brought up Catholic, but you moved away from that, you're still sort of like using some of that structure or like frameworks to access into this spirituality plane. And I'm wondering if that's like, if you've thought about that at all, or like if we were having this conversation and you weren't Cindy, but you were, I don't know, like Shyla, who lived in India, if we'd be talking about like, Krishna or Shiva versus Michael. And has that come up for you at all? Or have you thought about sort of like the framing of how these angel beings are like naming themselves to you? Like, is it a way for them to connect with you in a way that feels familiar, maybe?
Well, the archangels are the archangels. Now, they might have other names. They very well might have other names for different religions. But again, angels aren't really, they're not religious. An angel is a soul's status. It's not their identity. So it's their job, right? And so we have different religions all saying the same thing because we all have different tastes. We all have different affinities. Again, what we were talking about before, where we have that through line, right? I don't know if an angel has been reincarnated from a different spirit. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I guess it's more like my question is more like on like the naming of it all. Do I mean because like Michael, like if we were talking to someone from Japan, like Michael doesn't mean anything to them. Do I mean? So I guess that's what I'm trying to like
Well, but that's not necessarily true because again, Michael is not, it's not Christian. It's not through the Christian church and it's not necessarily through that. They've adopted that, right? The churches are the ones that have actually taken the angels and put them into their story. So maybe there is another name for an angel in it, but I don't know that in Buddhism. Buddhism doesn't really deal with a lot of angels necessarily.
Yeah, I literally just had like a memory pop up, which is I was just on social media there the other day and I saw someone talking about religion and they were talking about how European Christianity is not the oldest form of Christianity. It's actually Ethiopian Christianity is way older. And so it's just something that I've been thinking a lot about again, like to what we were discussing earlier around like how a lot of what we're talking about is like it's the through line, it's how it morphs and shifts over time. And so it starts to become like it evolves. And so I was just curious, like, the names and if I think that my assumption is that they also evolve or are access points in ways that if we were discussing this like, 1,000 years ago, it would be something different because it would have been a different context. But anyway, getting very like deep into the
Okay,
weeds
okay. So it's not so much about the name, it's just about their being. Is this
I think where I'm kind of landing is like I'm thinking that for everyone who's following this kind of journey that you've been on, I imagine that it's a very unique journey because I think what I'm hearing from you is that there's ways that these angels are essentially connecting with you in order to give you that access into this, spiritual realm. And I think what my thesis, if you will, is that connection and how it's named and discussed and presented is going to be a little bit different for each of us
yes,
because the way that will convince me to get into or allow me to access into this is going to be really different than like Rachel or you. Like, 'cause
absolutely.
I mean, maybe it's worth it for us to talk a little bit about our sort of like joint experience because I think that's a good example of this because we had this joint experience, which we could talk about, and we each had different manifestations of what you're.
Yes. Yes. And so, yes, spirit is going to find its way to you. And it's not going to be the same for everybody. It's going to be very different. There are some people that are very spiritual that have never had an encounter with an angel at all, right? There are so many different ascended masters that we can call on that have been around since ancient Egypt and before that, since Lemuria or Atlantis. All of that stuff, there is connection. And so we have our own affinities, right? And so my affinity is definitely has been with the archangels. Now I'm discovering other affinities as well because that is just a slice of 2000 years from Christianity, the beginning of Christianity.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
so I am much older than 2000 years. So I
Yeah.
have, if I could regress, I could probably go all the way back to Lemuria, which for those of you who don't know what that is, it's basically, it's the garden. It's the beginning.
It's The literal beginning of time.
Exactly. The literal, we are now inhabiting Earth as consciousness, right? And not just as cave people, but really, really quite advanced beings. We screwed up a couple of times. We restarted a few times. And so that was our first time around, was in Lemuria. And there are still connections to Lemuria that happen today with other people. Like I said, spirit is going to find their way to you in whatever your affinity is. If you have a specific lifetime where you were really, really connected to spirit, it's more than likely going to draw you to that. So for me, I had a super strong, obviously, a very strong connection to the time during the Spanish Inquisition and all that, because it drew me to that time. So for other people, spirit will draw them to something else, and then they'll find the book that then leads them to open up themselves, or they'll find the meditation, or they'll find the teacher, or they'll find the course. So yes, it's going to be different for everybody. Absolutely. 100%.
Oh my God, so many questions. We're definitely going to have a second part because I swear to our listeners, they're probably like, what the hell is even happening right now? Because we never talk about this kind of stuff. But I do really think that it does relate to what is everything that is happening in the
You're
world.
like, I promise.
We haven't even gotten there.
I know.
I
I'm like, I
know.
don't even know if we're going to get there in this time because I do feel like there needs to just be a lot of, so we might actually need to schedule a second time if that's okay.
Sure.
Because I want to make sure that like this makes sense. It makes sense to, I think, Felicia and myself. And maybe this would be a good opportunity to do sort of what Felicia had mentioned. I think talking a little bit about our experiences with you when Felicia, you came out here and the three of us, along with some other fabulous people, sort of had some experience with trying to figure this stuff out. And I will say that like contextually, I will not speak for anybody else on this, but for me, I do not consider myself a woo-woo person. That said, I think certainly knowing Cindy, and I think one of the things I love about you, Cindy, that you said is like, you're like, I know this is crazy. You're like, this, it sounds crazy, but
Yeah.
like, this is my reality. And I think that experiencing so much, there's been so much trauma that has happened throughout the ages, right? As we had talked about. And we are now experiencing this moment of heightened trauma. And so the reason why, I feel like we might have to talk about this a little bit in the intro, Felicia, when we do our intro, of why we think it's so important to have you talking about this, Cindy, is sort of what we were getting to before, which is entering this new time period and how this relates to, I think, what a lot of people are feeling, this feeling of grief and loss and confusion and fear and anger and disconnect, while also maybe finding a little bit of a different type of connection or a different way of thinking. So that's the reason why we want to have you on here. But maybe we can just talk a little bit too about, yeah, why don't we talk a little bit about our experience? Because I want to hear
Yeah.
about you, Felicia, and the snakes.
Oh, I know. And I feel like, yeah, let's definitely do a follow up because, again, like beyond the questions we sent you over in advance, Cindy, which we do for all our guests, I literally have like 50 other questions that have popped up. So,
I am happy to answer them. And I will just say that the reason we are, and I'm just going to say this right now, just quickly, the reason we are going through what we're going through right now is because we are ready to release an old way of being. And until we actually see what it is we have been agreeing to for 2,000, 4,000, 5,000 years longer, what we've been agreeing to as a collective, it's going to just stick around. So everything is just coming up to be seen so that we can finally say no more. We don't want to do this anymore. I'm ready for something more, something different, something new.
yeah.
And so this is why there is so much trauma. There is so much. It is fear releasing itself. And, we're birthing something. And I don't know if either of you have had children. Well, actually, I know that I don't think either of you have had children.
No,
Well, trust me, birthing pains are rarely pleasant. Let's just say that.
One of the 5,000 reasons why I've decided to not.
We are birthing a new way of being. And so, yeah, it's going to be bumpy and it's going to be painful. But the best way to get through it is to just envision the amazing, beautiful baby you're going to have.
I know both Rachel and I are like, we went to the rescue and selected our beautiful babies.
Our
But
cat
Perfect.
babies.
no, I completely agree with what you're saying, Cindy. And we've even on this podcast have actually chatted about that same metaphor of like we're going through a birthal of something new. And a lot of times change and transformation is messy and painful and traumatic. And so, yes, definitely this is again why we need to have a follow-up conversation with
Yes.
you because I know we're running a little bit short on time. So what I'll do is I'll just kind of start off a little bit talking about this experience that we sort of teased a little bit, and then maybe we can kind of see where that lands us, and then we'll go into our next session whenever we schedule that out. But yeah, so as you mentioned, Rachel, I think it was 2 years ago we decided actually before we even started recording, it was about 2 years ago. So as our listeners know, I'm based on the East Coast, and Rachel and Cindy are both in San Diego. And so I was out for work. And so Rachel was like, hey, so I've got this like thing that I'm going to with one of my friends. And she's doing this like you were, I believe, trialing a workshop, if that's my memory serves me correct.
I was guided to teach others how to connect to their own
Yeah.
kind of guides through the Akashic records. And so I'd put together a kind of a course, and I needed some willing participants to try it out. Yes. And
Yeah, which is
you
the
were
way to do it.
my first group. Yes.
Yeah, so we were like the trial run, which was great. And so Rachel was like, I'm gonna be, doing this thing over the weekend. It was like a Sunday afternoon or something. And she was like, do you want to come with me? Totally cool if you don't want to, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, yeah, I'm down because, I was like, otherwise I'll just like, I don't know what else I'll do and I'll just hang out. But same as you mentioned, Rachel, I don't consider myself super like woo woo, but I am definitely open to it. So like I'm ready to hear what people have to offer. So I was like, I'm ready to lean into this. So we went to your home, which is a lovely, beautiful space, and you had this just delightful outdoor space that I remember vividly. You basically let us do a lot of what you talked about, which was the pathway prayer and the somatic check-ins, and we journaled and we discussed and we had questions and we were checking in and asking, and you kind of helped us access into this space. And definitely both of you feel free to jump in because I know I'm missing stuff here, but I'll just share really quickly. So for me, I don't remember the exact order of like operations, but I know at one point you had asked us about holding a question in our mind. And then I think either we had journaled about it a little bit or you were asking us to hold the question and just kind of see what you received. And like, it was very meditative. And so when you had asked us to do that, I had this vision essentially, which was not the only time that it happened during this experience. It was, I think, maybe 2 or 3 times that I had the same sort of vision, but I had asked the question and it was, spoiler alert, it was business related. um,
Love
because I
that.
cannot get out of my head about our company, but it was definitely business related. And I had this question in my head. And then I had this vision where I suddenly felt this like, or I felt and like saw this like snake, and it was a huge snake. And it kind of like, I think at the first time it like sort of, I had this idea that it like wrapped around me.
It was like your
And
arm, wasn't
well,
it?
I think it was the second
That
time.
was the
So
second time.
so
Yeah.
the first time, I can't even believe you remember this, but the first
I
time
remember.
yeah, so the first time, I just felt like it was, like, around me, kinda like it wasn't constricting, but it was just sort of it felt very supportive, and then after we did these little exercises, you sort of had invited people to share if they wanted to, and so I shared it because I was like, it was weird because I'm really not a snake person, like, I don't like snakes, don't have them, would not like to come across them, so it's not like an animal or a being that I'm, like, drawn to necessarily. I shared that I felt this, like it was, like, a weird snake image that came to my mind. And then the second time, again, I forget what the prompt was, but we were doing something. And again, maybe it was like an extension of the question, but I had the snake pop back into my mind. And then this time, what happened was, and I'll never forget because it was such a vivid experience. So I remember it basically crawled around my left arm and like twined itself around my arm. And then it came up to the like joint where my elbow is, but like the inner joint. And then I remember I had this vision that it like bit me on the inside of my arm, but not in a way that was painful or designed to hurt me, but it was more like a security blanket. I'm holding you and I got you. And again, for
Oh,
any cat parents, it's like when your cat bites you but doesn't bite down because it's just like telling you like, "Hey." But in this case, it wasn't a boundary setting, it was a supportive feeling. And it was such a like vivid experience that I don't have tattoos, but I do think that if I get one, I feel like I have to get that as a tattoo in some way because it just like was so weird and just like came out of nowhere. So that's my little experience with that. So
You had, I think, the most vivid experience of everybody that was there. And I think that what was so amazing about it is that you had it twice. Like it wasn't just a one-time thing. It like was a reoccurring character in your connection.
yeah, whatever that character is in my experience or from my past, maybe I was a snake charmer. Who
Well,
knows?
it'd be very interesting. Did you ever the pathway prayer that I learned through the Akashic Records book is not the ones that you used because
Okay.
the one that I it's just so I mean it's long. It's like so long. And so I actually when I was creating this course, I actually asked, is there a short version that we can do because this is so long.
This is like
And
your own personal spiritual AI. You're like, hey,
seriously,
GPT,
that's exactly what it was.
Oh my God, is that the
Before
name
can you
of
it
the
condense this
episode?
prayer for me?
before chat gpt but it
Yeah.
was that's what I got. So what they said is yes, here are some words, make it work. And so they gave me just random words, like words would come through and I would just write these words down. And then I made a poem out of those words. And so that was what I ended up. So for me, I have the pathway poem and she has the pathway prayer. And yeah, so that's where that came from, was just kind of this is too long. It's too long. Nobody's going to do it. It's too long. I would be interested if you have you ever, gone kind of into a meditative state again and said the poem? Have you done it again and then journaled?
So you sent it to us afterwards, and I did it once or twice, and then I kind of left off. I mean, I'm not like a big meditative person. Like I don't do meditation a lot, but it's something where I've been like, if I needed to, it's there. But Rachel, you had like a child that came to you, right?
No.
Am I right?
Is a guy with a mustache.
Yeah, it was some
Oh,
guy that was very
definitely not
cheeky.
remembering.
Yeah, no, he was I don't remember the mustache, but I just remember he was like I was like, "Really? This is so me to be, like, white knuckling, trying to get something to happen," like and of course, how can anything happen when you're, like, white knuckling it? So, this is why I'm very Cindy and I, we worked a little bit together too outside of that, and it's like one of those things where I'm like, I just we talk a little bit about, like, how you receive, and it's like some people hear, some people, like, you get the words, some people you have the visual, and, like, for me, I'm like, I it's so hard, but I had this, like, very faint image of this handsome guy that was, like, basically telling me to, like,
That's
chill
what it
out.
was. Yes, it was a handsome guy. I
It was
remember
a handsome
that. It was
guy,
like
and
a
I
hot
think
dude being like, calm the F.
calm down, like, kinda, like, laughing at me, like, "Chill out," which feels and I think, Cindy, you were like, "That was Michael." I feel like you
I think I think it was Michael. I believe that it
I
was.
don't know, someone was laughing at me, whether it was my a version of myself that was laughing at me or
I think you were just trying so
oh,
hard.
girl, story of my life. Such a Virgo energy, you know?
Just try, make it happen. I'm seeing something. I know I am.
I know, exactly. I must see something or else I'm a failure.
Yeah. Well, and I also
Ah,
remember there was a hummingbird that came and hung out with us for a very long time in your backyard and just kind of like hanging out there. And I haven't researched too much, but I know that that can hold a lot of symbolism for people as well. So,
Birds in general are they are actually used quite a bit by light beings and angels to communicate. Birds are pretty popular to be used. They really are because they're easy to inhabit and then kind of or I don't know if they necessarily inhabit, but they're easy to connect to.
Mm.
And so someone that is a high vibrational light being would have no trouble kind of connecting to a bird and then getting them to fly to a certain area or yeah. No, birds definitely. And again, animals in general, they love high vibration. You're going to attract animals when you're in a high vibration. That's just how it goes. They love it. I mean, you've seen those videos on reels of the guy playing music and the cows loving it,
Oh, yeah,
right?
totally.
Everybody has seen those.
I said this to you, Felicia, you know this, and Cindy, I think I mentioned it in, like, the chat that we were at, but, like, after the ice raids here in San Diego, I had to give up meat. I was like, because I got so upset, I was thinking about all the cruelty in the world, and I was just like I just got really upset, and I was like and I haven't touched it since. I literally can't I cannot eat living flesh right now because it just feels so cruel. So I was like, yeah, the animals, I feel it very much so that like I feel like animals are better than humans right now in many ways. But
Yeah, it's not that they're better than humans. They're in energetic accord with the energy of the earth. They live in the now and
yeah,
only the now. They don't live in the past, they don't live in the future. They live in the now, and they are symbiotic with what their environment is. Like, we
yeah,
all
that's
create
true.
our environments and our realities, and animals do too.
Yeah. They don't have little clocks that tell us.
They
I think,
definitely don't. They react more to energy. That's what they react to. And
yeah.
we have that capability also. I mean, we've all been at a party where it's super, super fun, and then someone walks in the room and it's like, "Oh, wah, wah, wah."
Totally.
Right?
Yeah.
It's
Oh
like
my
energy is a
gosh.
real thing. It infuses. And the crazy thing is we don't even realize that we infuse each other's energetic fields constantly.
Absolutely.
Constantly. We are always receiving and we are always giving. Always, always. And if you're in a bad mood and you go into a place, people feel it.
Absolutely.
You
Absolutely.
don't have to say anything and people know. It
Yep.
doesn't even necessarily have to be on your face. Like, the look on your face doesn't give it away. It's just your energy. It's a real thing. That's a topic for another
I'm
time.
like,
I know.
seriously, we have to have
There's so
another
much science too.
there's so much to get into. I wanna just can I ask just one final
Yes.
question that is just gonna, like, just cap us all off? I know the answer to this, Cindy, but I want you to tell everybody else who's listening, are we gonna be alright?
We are going to be just fine. We have to go through this. This is not new. This is necessary. And I have zero fear. I just want you all to know. I have absolutely no fear. In fact, I am so excited for where we are right now as humans, because nothing changes if everything is just okay. Nothing changes if everything is just okay. Things have to get tumultuous and crazy for stuff to change. And that's what's happening, which to me is just like a big giant sign that says, hey, we're changing.
Yeah.
We're changing. And there are definitely going to be bumps, but the way to make it through, and I will say this for the listeners that have any fear of what's going on right now, the way to get through this time is to actually find as much joy in your life as you can. And I know there are a lot of people that out there feel like, how can I experience joy when there are so many people that are getting hurt or killed or screwed over or just in so much pain? How can I feel joy? Well, you're not doing anybody any favors by feeling miserable as well. Like we just said, we infuse our environment with our energy. And if everybody is feeling sad and angry and mad all the time, that's all we're going to experience. So we need to experience joy so that we can infuse our energetic field, our collective energetic field, with as much joy as possible, because that's what is going to lift us up. Everybody, you can't fight aggression with aggression. Plain and simple. You can't. All that does is fuel aggression. You fight aggression by changing hearts, by loving those that are so difficult to love. That is how we do it. And we can do that simply by finding some joy. I mean, there is so much about having to see the divine in your neighbor, in your brother, having to know that, okay, if I'm a divine person and we're all divine, then that person on that side of the fence is also divine. So let's connect to the divinity in each other and forget about the bad behavior. We're not talking about behavior, right? You can have bad behavior all day long. This is still a divine person, because we all are. There's not one soul that's better than another. There's not one that's higher than another. We're all equal. We're just, some of us are behaving badly, but we have to see past the behavior to the actual divine soul that's here to learn, that's here to grow, that's here. They're calling there. Think about what their reality must be like, right? Think about, what are they dealing with in their reality on a daily basis that makes them so miserable?
Yeah. Or
Like
what
that,
happened to
like,
them.
man, my heart goes out to you
Yeah.
that you are attracting this to yourself.
Yeah.
It's trying to do that, to find the divine in everything and seeing it in everything, and then just finding that joy. Because honestly, if you can find 10 minutes of like real joy that lifts you up, it is worth 10 work days with how you can get stuff accomplished. And I'm not kidding. If we're
Word.
just nose to the grindstone and we're miserable in our work and we're just doing everything constantly like this, what are you creating? You're creating anger and strife and frustration. Whereas when you're out and you're enjoying yourself, you're creating light and harmony. And that's what we're putting out. And when we do that, we align to our divinity. And then the universe starts working for us instead of against us. We just need to remember remember that we're all here doing the same thing, just trying to figure it all out. Just be kind.
Oh, those are great words to end us on, Cindy. Be kind. Well, we will definitely have to follow up again because even in these last minutes or two, I've had more questions that I'm trying to write down on the
I know.
side.
I'm seeing Felicia's head down, and I know that it's not because you're not
So
paying
many
attention.
But it's all good. It's all good. So thank you so much. This is a lot to dig into. And just briefly, because we'll do more with you for sure, we'll have you back. But in the meantime, if folks want to learn more, if they want to connect with you, what's the best way for people to find out more or to follow up with you if they would like?
Well, I have a website. I'm actually in the process of changing it a little bit, but it is still up. twosoulspeak.com. That's the number 2.
Okay.
twosoulspeak.com is where you can find me. And you can read a little bit more about what I do and how I work with other people. And I have a little blog on there that kind of gives some information about angels, if you like, and a lot of other things. But happy to hear from anybody that wants to contact me.
Amazing.
Thank you so much, Cindy.
Thank you for having me. I told you my story was long.
We love
it's
all
great.
of it.
Great.
We love it. Thank you.
Thank you for having me so much.
Well, that happened.
Yes.
We did it. We did it. We are going to have a part 2, so stay tuned. We hope that you enjoyed listening to this interview as much as we enjoyed that conversation.
Yes, thank you so much for listening, and hopefully you are still with us at this point. But why wouldn't you be? It's so interesting. Anyway, as you exit out your podcast listening, please don't forget to rate, share, and subscribe. It makes a huge difference in the reach of our podcast and, by extension, our work. You can visit us on YouTube, Instagram, and LinkedIn, and sign up for our newsletter at inclusiongeeks.com/newsletter to stay up to date on all things Inclusion Geeks. Stay geeky.
Bye.